Hello. Welcome to this talk. Here we got several people that are experts, I would say, in this "Who's My Neighbor" conversation that we're having here on Rev 7 9. We're gonna take a minute to introduce each person. We're gonna start with Jasmine Myers. Jasmine, can you tell us a bit about yourself, real quick?
Yeah, hi, my name's Jasmine Myers. I'm currently living in Tampa, Florida, and some past work I've done with immigrants include Chinese immigrants in Gainesville, Florida, as well as working with international students in Tampa and in Gainesville.
Nice. Next up is Siri. Siri.
Yeah, hey, my name is Syrio Day. I currently work for a refugee resettlement agency in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. I've been doing that for a couple years, and I mostly work with our vulnerable populations. So, clients that have maybe some extra barriers to adjusting to life here.
Awesome. And also we got on the call Robbie McAllister. Robbie, can you tell us a bit about work you've done with refugees in the past or right now you're doing?
My name's Robbie McAllister. I've been a pastor for many, many years, and currently I'm working in our state of South Carolina with the South Carolina Baptist Convention, working with connecting our 2,100 Baptist churches with the over 200,000 foreign born that live in our state. I'm also working regionally for refugee and immigration think tank, and I am kind of doing mobilization work among the faith community to try to communicate God's heart for the stranger and the sojourner among us. There's a thread throughout the Bible that talks about that, and just wanting to make sure that our faith communities are not only aware of that, but embracing God's heart for the orphan, the widow, the poor, and the stranger that's wandering
Mm.
among us. So that's what I do, as well as working internationally, primarily in the area of Greece, reaching refugees with the love of Jesus off the coast of Turkey, on the islands in Greece. So that's what I'm doing.
Man, awesome. And we got Mateo. Mateo, can you tell us where you're at right now and what you're doing?
Yeah, so my name is Matteo Echeverry, and currently I'm living in Cologne, Germany. My family and I have been here for about almost, almost 2 years in February coming up. It's crazy to think. And we are here laboring amongst refugees that have come in starting in 2015 due to the political unrest and all the war that's going on in their area of the world. And so here in Germany, we have people from all over Africa, all over the Middle East that are seeking refuge from what's happening back in their homeland. So we're here trying to love and serve them and share the love of Christ.
Awesome. We also got Todd Valentine on the.
Hey, yeah, definitely love to be here with everyone. I'm a campus missionary in Raleigh, North Carolina. Also co-leading Rev 7 9 with my guy Wells here.
Yes, and I am Wells here in Gainesville student. And yes, as Todd said, co-leading Rev 7 9. It's been exciting. And today's talk is on what we find in Luke 10 and when Jesus answered this expert of the law about who's your neighbor. And then I'm just going to I'm going to give a brief summary on what he says. But the expert of the law came to God and he asked Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus answered that you have to love your God with all your heart, all your strength, all your soul. But he also said, love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus went down and just giving different scenarios on about different things that happened when a man was going down Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. And as we see in scripture, several people passed this man and did not do nothing, but a Samaritan traveler came upon this man and showed him mercy. And Jesus asked the expert of the law, um, who who which of these three do you think was a neighbor to a man who fell in the hands of robber? And the expert of the law said, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And I feel like this scripture really impacts me as a immigrant from from Haiti coming to United States, had I had a lot of like cultural shock, and also like seeing how people were treating me differently because I'm from here, I have an accent, etc. And you can tell where I'm from already. Maybe not, but my accent's pretty strong. Sometimes you can't understand me. Just all this experience with living in a different country, um, different people, different culture, and just experiencing yeah, just different people and how they impacted me. And I feel like how people have impacted my life very well, and a lot of people have impacted my life very badly. But today we're just gonna focus on like the refugee crisis um, here in the world, as we have here people working in the states, also people overseas, just seeing how this refugee crisis is impacting different nations. Um, but we're gonna start with a question with Siri, just asking like, what is it like to be a refugee, Siri? If you can give us some insight on that.
Yeah, I would love to, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions that people have about what it's like to live as a refugee, but also just what a refugee is, anyways. I think a lot of people maybe kind of have assumptions that refugees, like they are happy to be here, but a lot of refugees have been forced to flee their country because of persecution. So being resettled in a country, it's a huge challenge for them. You know, they've been leaving a culture, an environment, a community that they know and that they love, and is so tied deeply to their identity. And they're uprooted and placed in a new country where they have to learn an entirely new culture. Um, and I think in my work a lot, I pretty much interact with new arrivals, so people that are here from maybe a year to 5 years, you know, in the United States. So we get to participate in a lot of that learning process of teaching people the culture, teaching people, you know, basic things that we would take for granted, like going to the grocery store, um, getting a debit card, uh, learning how to talk to your manager to tell them that you're sick and you can't come to work, figuring out where to go to the doctor, how to talk to the doctor, what kind of information they need from you. You know, all these things that are so easy for us that we that they're second nature. You know, but for refugees and someone that isn't native to this country, that's all new, and they have to learn all of that. And in the midst of that, they have like real life challenges that they have to address. Like, you're in this country that has taxes, it has bills. You got to go to work, you got to figure out how you're going to pay your rent. And maybe you've never had to pay bills online before, or you've never even used the internet before, but guess what, now you have to learn, because if you don't, you might get evicted from your house. So real life challenges with real life consequences. um, yeah, I think a lot of people, they just view refugees or even immigrants too as people that kind of just come here. And something I've heard a lot growing up is people that are going to come here and like take our jobs, um, which is tough to hear, but I think comes from ignorance. Um, Maybe sometimes maliciousness too, but really just a lack of understanding. And more often than not, people like that have never interacted with an immigrant or refugee before, because realistically, they work really hard. They work entry level positions often at hotels and restaurants and landscaping companies, jobs that don't require work experience or language. Most refugees don't come here knowing English. So, and it's not easy to learn a new language. So there's there's a lot there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely the real picture of a refugee's life in the United States is it is challenging, but they are extremely resilient. They're extremely smart and savvy to have made it all the way here, coming out of persecution and coming out of violence and learning how to overcome that. Um, but that doesn't mean that they get to the United States and it's easy
yeah.
peasy.
Yeah, Siri, you mentioned some things as in like how it's very hard for them to be able to do simple life things as in like responding to their managers, etc. I know Jasmine Mateo probably had the same sort of like interaction going to China and also going to Cologne. If you guys have some insight on like how you dealt with those things, going living in another country as a American and not knowing the language. If you can give us some insight on that, Mateo and Jasmine.
Yeah, I can go
Yeah,
first on that. Just talking about, like what Siri said, there's so many different things that we take advantage of that seem so simple when we're in our home country, but seem almost incredibly difficult the minute you go somewhere else. Like I remember something as simple as clothes. You go to the store, you are looking at prices, you're looking at material of clothes. For me, I was living in China for a time, and I'm from Florida. I've never really experienced cold weather, and so I'm trying to find a down jacket. I'm like, okay, down jacket. Now suddenly having to go through all these Chinese stores and read like, well, okay, how do you translate down? And then I realized there's different type of down, and then not knowing exactly what material was the best one, and I'm just like, this is something that should have only taken me maybe like 15 minutes in the store, ended up taking me like an hour and a half to find the jacket that I was looking for. Or something as simple, again, the grocery store. I'm looking around for ingredients that I'm used to eating and not being able to find them. But then being able to find ingredients that I don't know what they are. And again, the signs are in Chinese. And at least for me, I was able to read some Chinese, but still being confused. I'm like, okay, I can read this, but I'm still not sure exactly what this is. And so it's a lot of guesstimation. And I remember one time when I went to the grocery store, like I thought I did everything right. I was checking out, I was leaving, and then you have like the security people running after me, and I'm like, oh no, what did I do wrong? And apparently it was you have to pay for the plastic bags as well that the groceries are in, and I didn't pay for them, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, because like in America they're free. You just take the bag and keep on walking. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go back and pay for my bags. But it's just like little things like that that can get your heart rate up so much just because you're confused on what's happening, and they're speaking in rapid Chinese. So I'm like, oh wait, I'm really confused. What are you talking about? And trying not to look guilty just because I'm just confused of what's happening in the situation. Or something as simple also as the hospital. There was a time I hurt my leg pretty badly while hiking a mountain. And so I had to go to a hospital. I walk in the hospital and it's just like, people are going past me. No one's talking to me. I'm just trying to find one kind face to tell me where should I check in or where should I go. And because it looks like there's 5 check-in places and everyone's in a different line. And it just takes, again, something that should maybe only take an hour or so ended up taking the full day of me trying to ask people. And thankfully, one kind nurse leads me through the entire process. And she's like, oh, give me your money, take this, do that, do this. But if it hadn't been for her, I probably would have left because I was very confused on what was going on. And there's just so many examples of those things, either phone SIM cards or going to the bank or going to the gym or restaurants, like reading menus. Reading menu, I feel like it should be so simple, but it turns into a 20-minute affair when you have to translate each and every character, and the waiter is still looking at you like, "What do you want?" And I'm like, I have only gotten through the first like 3 things of this 20 list menu. I need a few more minutes. There's still, yeah, a lot of different difficulties that seem so easy in your native country that take 2, 3, 5 times longer when you're in a different country.
Yeah, I bet. Can you give us some more insight on that? Your experience, Mateo?
yeah. Well, I'll share something I'm in the middle of right now is trying to get my driver's license. And uh, in Europe, getting a driver's license is not as simple as in the States. And it's really expensive. It takes a lot of time. Thankfully, uh, when you come from Florida, all you need to do is take a theoretical test. But even that has proven really difficult. And so I started the process before COVID. And, you have to go to an office. Germans love their paperwork. And for every piece of paper, there's a special office you need to go to. And long story short, I've been to the same place 3 times because each time I went, I thought I had understood what I needed, but it turns out I hadn't understood what I needed. And so each time I left away finding something new out. And to this day, now it's because of COVID. COVID messed everything up. But I still don't have my license because it's just a different process. You think you understand what you need, and then it turns out you don't understand it, and it's just exhausting. So even simple things like that just are take forever and are frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds it was pretty frustrating. Also, me just learning when I first came to the United States, learning Creole, not learning English from Creole, and my mom
Mm-hmm.
was teaching me. And being in school, I was like this young little boy. I was 12, and I had to write an essay. And I remember just staring at the paper and just not writing. The only English word I knew was "the," and just and I had a friend, and he was I guess assigned to me to help me write this essay, and we were like, I couldn't understand what he was saying, and he couldn't understand what I was saying, so all I wrote in the paper was "the," and to this day is the most funniest story I tell people. I wrote my first essay, it had one word on it, and it was "the." I turned it in with my name, and it was pretty frustrating, and it's a process, and it takes time to be able to yeah, get used to um, the culture you're in, the new culture, and I feel like that's why people not fully understand what that process it takes to be able to like, yeah, I'm feel more comfortable and be able to feel more at ease to be able to talk to other people and understand what they're saying. But we're gonna move on to Robbie. Robbie,
Well, it's real quick, just a quick follow up question for Siri. Mateo mentioned the challenges of getting a driver's license, but that that COVID made it challenging for him to get a driver's license. Are you seeing any challenges with the work you're doing? Like I like to think, most of us like to think in our American just privilege. This has been tough for us, but would you say it's been even more so tougher for the folks that you're working with?
Oh yeah. For sure. Yeah. Because again, I think it kind of goes back to things that we tend to take for granted. So thinking especially about COVID, pretty much all services went remote. And you have to have a certain level of technical literacy and English literacy to navigate those well. And for so many of our clients, it's like it's hard enough to show up to the doctor in person and ask like, can I have an appointment? Because navigating a phone system with automated messages, figuring out which number you have to press, waiting on hold, and then talking to someone and then asking for an interpreter, and they may or may not tell you that you can have one, or they may say, oh, we're going to call you back, and then you miss the phone call. There's all of these hiccups along the way, and it gets really discouraging. Like there are clients that uh, Jasmine, kind of like you said, like if you hadn't had someone to help you, it would have been like, heck, man, I'm walking out of the hospital. Like I've had clients that were like, man, I did try, but I called 5 times and no one ever picked up the phone. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. So definitely a lot of stuff like that because of COVID. Yeah. And also just things like driver's license, applying for social security cards, all that kind of stuff. It all kind of depends on if you're able to get someone who knows refugees and knows their paperwork. Because if they don't, clients get turned away like left and right because of the person that they're going to that should have the knowledge to help them knows about the program. Maybe they know about a driver's license, but they don't know, like, well, refugee documents aren't the same as what I'm used to. I don't know what to do with it. Instead of talking to someone else about it and figuring out, I'm going to send them away.
Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely eye opening for real,
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah, I like if even the process of like language, learning language. I don't know what you guys where you work at Siri, how they take time to teach them the English language and things like that. Do you guys do work in that aspect, like trying to teach the refugees how?
Yeah, yeah. So it can change kind of from resettlement agency based on what resources and capacity you have, but we have an English teacher. So we do English courses for our clients like every day throughout the week. And then we make referrals to local community colleges. Like here we have Wake Tech and Durham Tech have some really good programs uh, for clients that want to like enroll in an extra English class. Um, which and we're lucky to have that. Like there are some offices that they don't have the funding or the capacity to hire an English teacher, so they have to make outside referrals, or clients um, maybe learn from friends. Once clients get jobs, um, it's being around English so much every day helps a lot with that practice. um,
For sure.
or for kids when they're in public school, kids tend to pick it up really quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Very glad to hear the work you're doing, Siri. And my next question I want to ask is I want to really focus on like I remember Siri mentioned like people are leaving their countries because they're being persecuted and things like that. There's a lot of things that's happened that cause them to like flee. I want to ask this to Robbie. Do you have any like specific things, Robbie, on like what are they fleeing from? If you've heard stories, I don't know if you work in Greece and you probably heard seen a lot of things and heard a lot of stories. You can give us some more insight on like what are they fleeing from specifically.
Yeah, well, thank you for, asking that question. It's different in different places, but currently, I think the latest statistics I saw is there are over 70 million people worldwide that are displaced from their place of birth. And as Siri was saying, these are people that, they don't want to leave their communities. They're not, most of the times, refugees are not leaving because they want to go. They're leaving because they have to go, for different reasons. And it's a real sad situation. About half of that 70 million are actually refugees that are leaving out of they live out of their country of birth. And um, many of them that I've worked with are coming from countries like Syria, where they're in civil war, um, Iraq, where there's been war there for the last 20 plus years and even longer, Afghanistan, where the Taliban, are very active in targeting, families and people that um, are at risk. And so, they're fleeing famine, they're fleeing war, they're fleeing violence. And I mean, it's very, very startling to me to meet refugees that are living in what I would call squalor in camps, and for them to smile, tell you that they're so happy to be there because they don't have to worry about a bomb going off in their home that night, or their little sister being kidnapped and trafficked, or there are many of those kinds of things. And so we can't really relate, to their experiences, but they're glad to have a place that's safe, that they can start over. And so yeah, a lot of the people that we meet, most of the refugees are going through trauma. It's an extremely traumatic kind of experience. And, what they need is they need people to listen to their stories. I've heard from one psychiatrist that over 50% of trauma care is just letting people get their stories out. And if you can just sit and listen and love them and let them know that they matter to God and they matter to you, that's a big part of their healing process. And of course, for us, we know as followers of Jesus, we know that ultimately what's going to give them eternal hope is a relationship with the living God through Jesus Christ. So, we lead with love, and we hope and pray that God will allow us an opportunity to connect them to the ultimate hope, which is his son in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so I guess that's a short answer, a longer answer. I'm not sure if that answers the question or what, but that's what I've found, at least working in Greece. It's a little bit different working here because most of the refugees that I've experienced working with here have been in refugee camp for many, many years, and a lot of them have been well vetted. They're not coming immediately from Afghanistan or, Syria. Generally, they're coming from a camp that they've been in for many, many years. They've been vetted. They're not a threat to our country. And so when they get to America, even though they've been living the refugee life, many of them have almost, I mean, a group that a family we helped settle that came from Sudan, they had been in a refugee camp for over 10 years before they were resettled to America. So they had resided in a camp for 10 years outside of their home area. And so when they got here, even though they were still, totally unfamiliar with the surroundings and everything Siri mentioned about what we had to do to help them was true in terms of language and social security cards and medical care and all that. Um, that's very traumatic. But they weren't experiencing the immediate trauma that many of them are experiencing as they come into Europe, where Matteo is and where some of the work we're doing in Greece are. So it's nonetheless important, but it's just a different experience. And the need's the same. They need to be loved. They need to be valued. They need to know that they matter to God. And the way God shows them that is through his people. And so that's one thing that we're trying to do is try to help people of faith understand the value and the call that we have to show the love of Christ to all tribes and tongues and peoples and nations.
Amen. Would you say that the trauma that they've been through um really affect how they find a way to like transition uh from where they are, like the family that was in that camp for 10 years. I bet that was like a lot of like traumatic experience because I've never been into a camp, so I don't know what actually happens in a camp because I've heard stories of people being abused, hurt. Would you say with them being in the camp, does it make it even more harder for the transition to happen, Robbie?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's different for different people. I know that the camps are not, it depends on what camp you're in. It depends on what country you're in. The camps that I've worked in, many of them are, in themselves, they can be violent. There can be, especially when you mix people groups, you mix religious groups, there can be abuse and things going on within the camp, lack of safety, not to mention lack of basic, it's just a very, very raw place, just basic necessities are provided. Um, and so, yeah, it can be very difficult. I mean, we had a family from, uh, I think he was from Iraq, his family, and they moved here, and he was an interpreter for our military. And when he got into the camp, he was a very, very smart man. He was very um, active in helping keep the peace within the camp. And one night, his wife went to the bathroom, and she was attacked by some people from a different ethnic group, and just really traumatized her very, very hard. And it made them very much afraid. And so we were able to help them get out of that camp and get into a more secure camp. And to be honest, I think now they're living actually in Germany, Mateo. I'm not sure what city, but so you're right. I mean, I think the trauma is somewhat different. I met another young man from Mosul, Iraq. He was in a family of 13 people. A bomb hit his house one night and killed 12 of the 13. He was the only survivor. He was in the rubble for 3 days before they pulled him out, and he ended up in Greece. And so that trauma is a little bit different than the trauma of maybe racial attacks in a camp, but they're nonetheless serious and they affect people, in terrible ways. And we just need to be there for them to love them and help them, work their way through that whole process. So,
Man,
Yeah, and actually, could I piggyback off of that a little bit?
yeah, go ahead.
So I think a lot of my clients that I work with kind of fall into the group of being in refugee camps for years and years. Um, and something that's interesting that I feel like I've noticed in my clients as far as an effect of being in a refugee camp for so long is if you think about the country that they came from as a persecuted and oppressed population, they hear this messaging that kind of like, you don't have a voice, you don't have rights, you can't do anything for yourself, you do exactly what I tell you. And you transition to a refugee camp where you can't work, You pretty much just live there and you wait, and people tell you where to sleep, they tell you where to go to the bathroom, they give you your food, and they tell you what you can wear. And there's really no agency there. And in a temporary situation, it's like, that's not bad. Like, that makes sense functionally. But if you think about the kind of impact that that would have on someone's mind for years, I feel like in ways it's like it kind of reinforces this oppression that they've already been under. And I find that with a lot of my clients, there's a lot of work that we have to do to almost teach them to advocate for themselves, to remind them and to teach them, like, you can do things for yourself. Like, you don't have to wait for someone else to tell you exactly what kind of life you're going to have. Like, you can take the initiative and build up, like, you have the freedom to do that now. And I think that kind of effect is a different kind of trauma than someone who is like very recently displaced. Um, but yeah, that's something, Robbie, just as you were talking, that really came to mind, that we notice a lot.
Yeah, man. This is very tragic. Living when I went over to Germany, just hearing stories from people in from different countries that's been being persecuted or not very stable. They're leaving their home because of wars and etc. And it really touched my heart. It's very tragic things that these people are going through. And Robbie, you mentioned that you mentioned about like things like that happening, and I just want to go next to saying asking what are some things you are doing and people you work with to like be there for those people um in Greece or wherever that you guys go.
Well, we work until recently. COVID has stopped, a lot of what's going on, at least from our work. But before COVID hit, we would work in the camps, volunteering, helping provide housing, helping to um, basically, when you're having hundreds of people come in every day, and there's just a logistics and a management issue that you have to work with. And so we would guard populations that were vulnerable, unaccompanied minors. We're having people show up in the camp we worked with. At one point there were over 20,000 refugees in a space about the size of, oh, I don't know, 5 square blocks maybe. And so, it was very overpopulated. And of that 20,000, about 6,000 were children. And we're talking about kids under 18 years old. And of that 6,000, about, well, I don't know, a good portion, about 1,000 or 1,500 were unaccompanied minors. They showed up without parents. They lost their parents on the way. Their parents were killed, and they were just sent. And so you can imagine these are very vulnerable, people. I mean, extremely vulnerable. Another case would be a single mother who had, 2 or 3 children with her, and her husband was killed by ISIS or by the Taliban, and she's by herself with her 3 kids. And that you have this tremendous cultural stress that comes with women not being valued in certain cultures. And then you couple that with the fact that she's got kids, and then she's on the refugee journey. Maybe she lost a family member on the journey, through drowning. Over 10,000 people have drowned as they've tried to cross from Turkey to Greece over the last, 5 years. So, it's incredible the trauma they go through. So we're just there to help, give them a blanket, give them food. I went out one day and bought 100 pairs of socks because they had just come out of the water and they were cold. And so I went around and put socks on the kids' feet. I mean, it's a very, it's not anything dramatic or, huge, but to them it's life, and so they're asking, why are you here? That's a question we get a lot, and that's when you just basically say, we're followers of Jesus and we love you. And then that just opens up amazing conversations because, especially in the Islamic world, a lot of those people have been told that Christians hate them, that, we don't care about them. And then for them to see Christ followers loving them, it's a big disconnect, and it creates a little bit of a dissonance in their thinking, so that they are all of a sudden more receptive to understand, well, maybe there is something that we need to listen to, and that leads to further conversations. And so, we're not allowed to share the gospel in the camps, because it's a government run facility, but we are able to build relationships in the camps, and then we can go outside the camp and share in food trucks and things like that, or invite them to meetings, and they're great. I mean, we don't see it as taking advantage of them. We're just loving them, and we're trying to share hope with them. And of course, our story, hope includes the gospel. So, we're just sharing the hope, that we know. And hope is not just political safety or a safe place to live. I mean, hope has to include, you know, a connection with the living God who created them. And so, that's kind of the way we look at that. Does that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, perfect, man. Thank you for doing that, Robbie. And I know that's those people are like they first like you guys are first responders that meets them when they get off the boats or wherever they're coming from. And yeah, they need those physical aspect into to help them, like you said, like you went out and buy like 1,000 socks. I don't know how many socks, but to give it to them. And that shows that you care, and just that little aspect of that little action can go a long way.
Well, I'll be honest. I will say this. To me, I don't want to say there's something great that we're doing. To me, it's a real privilege to be able to do it, because I'm telling you, when I look at the Bible and I look at Jesus, I see a servant leader who, he didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And I think as a follower of Christ, we have not only a message, we have a life to give people. We give ourselves away. That's all part of serving. And, when we give ourselves away, God fills us up. And it's not with material possessions or this or that or the other. I mean, his spirit, really encourages us when we love in his name, every person, and so I think, um, I just, I just find it the greatest privilege I've ever had in my life is to clean up the trash in a refugee camp for a poor refugee family that just came off of a boat. To me, that's a huge privilege, to do that. And anyway, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't come across like I was something great because I bought 100 pairs of socks. That's not. I mean, I'm sure Siri and Mateo, we can all, share those stories. I mean, we really get fed ourselves when we feed others, kind of
Yes,
thing.
amen, amen. And to move on, I know Mateo and Jasmine got firsthand on just loving on these people after they probably were processed from the boats, and Robbie is probably the first person that beats them, and they get sent out to a country. I know Germany got filled with a lot of refugees. I got a chance to go to Germany and try to share the hope of Christ one summer. I know Jasmine got to go to China and also share the hope of Christ there. Um, I just want to take this next part to ask you guys this question: how are you guys in Germany loving on these refugees? Also, that may be your neighbors, and also in China. We're gonna start with Jasmine. Can you give some stories and insight how you were just loving on your neighbors that was around you in China?
Yeah, for me, I would say just loving on neighbors is just how you invite them into your own spaces. Now, this is a little, it wasn't difficult for me, but I just think about, okay, I have this small dorm room. How can I invite the people around me into my space? And so just really simple ways of um, even inviting people to come in to watch movies or just to come and talk. One thing I really appreciated in the dorm room areas is a lot of people have open door policies. It's kind of just like knock and you can come in. And so just allowing people to come in and really sharing one another's culture. I had so many talks over because there's like a laundry room. So over the laundry room, that leads to, oh, come to my dorm to have this meal with me. And then we proceed to have a meal. And then saying, oh, come to, now go to this room to have this thing. It's just so interesting meeting people from so many different cultures because the dorm I was living in was for foreign students. So it reminds me of how you can find people of different nationalities and even unlikely places. Because I went to Asia saying, oh, I'm going to reach out to these people. But I ended up going there and, if anything, interacting with more people, more from Africa and the Middle East, which was really interesting. Saying that, God can bring people from all over different places and you might just find yourself somewhere and be like, wow, um, I have this opportunity just to still love someone who's of a different culture than I. And so that's why I just think about how to invite people in. And I think the same thing when I working with, for example, like Chinese immigrants in the US, of how whether hosting Mid-Autumn Festival parties or hosting Chinese New Year parties and cooking all this different um, Chinese food and inviting them into my apartment and just seeing their hearts be so touched and be like, wow, like you really cared and you really try to understand my culture. It's just, I just think hospitality is the best way to connect with people and how to love your neighbor. Because there's something intimate about when you can invite someone into your own space and really come to an understanding with one another.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, Mateo, how are you loving on your neighbors in yeah in Germany, Cologne? I know for firsthand I got to experience it, and it was a great an interesting summer to be able to like go out there and just love on them and share the hope of Christ with them. And then you are living there, and you probably way more people interact with way more people, went to way more um, camps and seen a lot more than I had to that I saw those 2 months I was there. Give us some more insight on that, Mateo.
Yeah, so when refugees get to Germany, um, Germany and places like France and Sweden, they're really the end of the refugee highway. So that's where the refugees want to get to. And the needs in a place like Germany are very, very different to say what Robbie's talking about in Greece. The German government and the government of the different Nordic countries, they do a great job at taking care of all the physical needs of the refugees. And so, because a lot of their programs are socialized, they get automatically free healthcare, free housing, and the refugee camps in Germany are not like what Robbie's describing in Greece. They're typically, uh, you know, apartments that have been uh, yeah, repurposed for housing refugees or hotels that are repurposed for refugees. And so it's very different in that there's not a huge need for physical relief. But what we find is that people are really lonely. And a lot of these countries that they're coming to, the culture is a very, very dry culture where people are just not warm. They're not typically friendly, and it is a huge shock because most of these people coming from the Middle East or from Africa, their cultures are so warm, and they're used to having friendly faces and just randomly inviting people over for dinner and things like that. And uh, the Germans are a lot of good things, but that is just not how the Germans are. And so we find that um, our strategy has been simply to go knock where we know that a lot of refugees live, and we knock on doors, and we say, "Hey, we're followers of Jesus. We moved here to Germany, and we're trying to meet friends and hear people's story, and we'd love to hear your story of how you came to this country." And a lot of times, what happens is they open their doors, they invite us in, and they cook us a feast. And a cool story has been actually from the summer you were here, Wells. You'll remember Adnan and his family. They're uh, a Syrian family. They've become dear friends, and you know they have a really hard story. Uh, they lived 3 years in a war zone in the middle of a city. It's a family of five. They lived in a single, like in a one-room hotel room, and for 3 years, just hearing bombs going off every day. I mean, just crazy sad stories. And they finally made it to Germany. We've been able to share the gospel with them. In particular, Adnan seems pretty open. And just recently, I randomly got a text from Adnan um, saying, "Hey, could you please pray for my mom?" And it turns out she had cancer. She had to get a quarter of her lung removed. And it was cool to see that he reached out to me to ask for prayer. So we were able to pray. And we just, something as simple as cooking the meals because she was in the hospital. So We cooked several meals for his family and brought him over and just visit them and love them and stuff like that. Uh, that typically they'd have somebody do that for them at home. They just have nobody here, and we're able to show the love of Christ that way. You know, another benefit that we have in Germany, like I was saying, because there really isn't that huge need for physical relief, if you will, but more relational relief. Um, I would say that people are just hungry to talk, and I don't know if you guys, well, I'm sure maybe you guys here on the call have thought about it, but maybe if you're listening, I don't know if you've realized what an amazing opportunity God has given us for the fulfillment of the Great Commission through this immigration crisis. You know that the Bible teaches that Jesus will not return until the gospel of the kingdom is preached in every nation. You know that it's in the whole world that it's preached, and the language that Jesus used when he gave us the Great Commission, it's this word all nations is not the geopolitical groups that we have today. You know, the language is in Greek is pantata ethne, meaning every people group. And a lot of these refugees that are coming into Europe are from people groups where historically there has been little to no gospel presence. And a lot of these people have never ever heard the gospel shared with them before. Maybe they've gotten a corrupt view of what supposedly Christians think, especially in the Muslim world. They really corrupt what we believe, but nobody has explained to them what Jesus has done for them. And so in Germany, these people are hungry to talk. And what I do is I just walk up to people and I say, "Hey, I live here and I'm going around meeting people in the park today and asking them a question. Do you have a few minutes to chat?" And most of the time, they're happy to talk to me. You know, people, usually strangers don't walk up to them to talk to them, and I get to hear their story and I get to ask them if they've ever heard what the Bible has to say about how to know God. And that way, I've gotten to share the gospel with people, man, from all over the world, all over the Middle East, all over North Africa. Think, you know, if I were to want to go to Morocco or Algeria or Tunisia or Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran uh, and do what I'm doing here, I'd either get kicked out right away or potentially even killed. And and now we have the freedom and the protection from the government. You know, we have freedom of speech, freedom of religion to share the hope of Christ with people. And the misconception that people think that, man, people don't want to talk about the gospel, that's just wrong. You know, these people love to talk about God and they love to talk about faith. And so it's not uncommon for me to go out. You know, this just happened. There's an Arabic store right around the corner from where I live. I went in, I was looking for something, got talking to the guy, shared I was a Christian, and he just wanted to talk and has invited me back every week to go back and talk to him. And I'm going back this week to talk to him about the gospel. And it was he who asked me to come back. And so it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. God's working a lot with this whole refugee crisis, is bringing all these people into like a place like Mateo says. We are protected by the government to be able to freely share the gospel. And when I was in Germany, hearing all these stories and just being able to like share the love of Christ and see people like listen, people are just asking questions or come back. Let's talk. We talked about one guy, me and Hudson talked to. We talked from like the whole entire night to like midnight, just about like he had so much question about hey, why does the Bible say this? Why does my dream say this? And we got to like just explain to him, rent go to the gospel with him and just explain a lot of things. And he just seen his face and his heart is just like God is softening his heart to get to know him. And this is an incredible thing. And I hope people that are listening in that are in the United States have want to go to like a short-term mission trip or long-term mission trip, or even here in the United States, we have a lot of people, refugees. Like, what would you guys say to those people? Like, how can they go out and be able to like speak to these people? Because I know some people tells me, oh, they feel uncomfortable because they don't understand the language, or I don't know. There's a lot of things they say to try like I feel like there are excuses to not be able to like go and like intentionally reach those people. What are some ways you can tell people to start like get them comfortable starting to be able to like go talk to these people out there?
I would just say, uh, like I was saying, most of the the cultures where these people are coming from are really warm cultures, and I I can guarantee that the norm is probably that most of them have never had an American uh, either just out of nowhere start a conversation with them or ask them about their life, or unless it's at a place specifically designed, kind of where Siri works, where they know they can find help. Uh, Man, just if you have neighbors, just go introduce yourself. Say, hey, I'd love to get to know you. Could we get tea sometime or get coffee sometime? Just ask them about their life. And people love to tell you about their culture and about what life was like in their country, and what they've been through and why they had to move. And just be a good listener and just ask questions, and you'll be amazed at what God can do through that.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, I want to just even throwing out one of the verses I would say has been a foundational verse for me going into ministry. It's First Thessalonians 2:8, and Paul saying to the people of Thessalonica that not only did we share with you the gospel of God, but our own lives because you were so very dear to us, and even to as we approach the who is our neighbor, to see these people is like, man, I want to share the gospel with them, but even my own life, and even in that, we know in that life sharing like moment when we're sharing our life, that man, there's an appreciation I have for you and your culture and what made you the person you are, and very much so the same. And so, uh, like Mateo said, simply just asking, can we get tea together? A buddy of ours, my roommate Tristan, he was able to do that with a Turkish family that I actually had the privilege of living in a neighborhood in Raleigh, which was like Little China, Little India, all over. I might have been one of the very few American-born folks in the neighborhood, and it's so special, right? Like literally, we go every Wednesday sharing in that neighborhood, and I remember just kind of going door to door and giving like we had gotten snacks and to give to just some of our neighbors. It was a Chinese couple. They had just the cutest little kid. He's like 3 years old, baby Tauntaun. And, we were giving them snacks, and bros wanted to share it with us and things of that sort. And just going over there and checking on how are things going? How's life going for you guys? I think that is so important. That is so underrated. And us just being just Christians who are going out and just sharing God's love with people, sharing our lives.
Yeah, it's very important. Like here, one story is we have a next to me in my apartment I have a Colombian family, and their little kid loves to go swimming, and then I'm like I go swimming to try to train, um, for a competition later the year. But when I used to go to the pool, she's like, "You're a great swimmer. Can you teach my kid how to swim?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll teach your kid how to swim." And that just started conversation. Now they part of like our group chat, and like they're just like, hey, do you guys make food sometime? Because she loves making food. I was like, yeah, we make food. And she found out that I'm Haitian. We make Haitian food. She's like, we should try out some other food sometimes. And like, we plan in the future to like, hey, let's make some food and just have a dinner and invite everybody that lives around us to be able to come. And she was so excited seeing that. Just that interaction, me at the pool and her just um, observing and talking and asking me, hey, can I do this? I was like, for sure, I would love to be part of your kids learning how to swim. And yeah, those small moments that God gives us opportunities. I know I pray God gives me opportunities daily to be able to like share His love to others are very important. And I feel like we can't be blind of those opportunities. I feel like we gotta make sure we be able to like, hey, this is where God's putting this in front of me. Let me try to be bold and take action on that. Yeah, some people it's really hard to like, hey, let me be bold in the gospel, but like God's is asking us to be bold in the gospel. I challenge y'all to yeah, talk to you guys, neighbors, people that are listening. Yeah, take time to get to know their life, their stories. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys on this call. Thank you, Jasmine, Siri, Robbie, and Mateo for taking your time to share like the things that you guys are doing. I'm very encouraged sharing you guys' stories, and I hope you guys are blessed by God. I'm gonna finish this with a prayer, um, and then I'm gonna let you guys go and keep doing some great work that you guys doing in your I pray. Thank you, God, for these amazing people. Thank you for yeah, people in general that you have a heart for, Lord. I just pray as we go out into the world, we'll be able to yeah, see the opportunities that you've given us to share to these people, Lord. I pray these people that are going through crisis that you be there, give them strength and peace, Lord. Just also give us boldness to be able to start conversation about the hope that you've given the world, Lord. I just pray that yeah, that every tribe and tongue may get to know you. And I pray for laborers and pray for opportunities and people to be able to yeah, take these opportunities to share your love to the entire world, Lord. I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.